name's Kailyah.
Hey, Kailyah. My name's Zainab.
Hi, Zainab. My name's Liz, or Elizabeth Acevedo, but you all can call me Liz.
Okay. We're here today to ask you a few questions.
Hey!
About your book.
Yes!
Poedex.
Let's do it.
And with Fire on High.
I'm excited.
Dive right to it.
Alright. You want to ask first?
Yeah, so while writing this book, like, what was your creative process like? Like, how did you, for the Poedex, like, the inspiration, everything, what was the creative process like? And how did you take it all in to write the Poedex?
Right. So you're both writers, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine that you write a single poem and how long it takes to write a single poem. Now multiply that times 368 poems and trying to hold all of those pieces in your head while building a character. So in some ways it was so rewarding because I didn't just have to say, okay, this is going to be a 3-minute poem or it only has to be on one single page. I could kind of explore, this is how she feels about this guy and this is how she feels about her mom, and really build a bunch of poems that are in conversation. But there were times that I kind of didn't know what happens next. I don't outline. I don't really, right. And so I'm kind of like, ooh, when was the last time we saw Kailyah? I don't know when that was. Or like, okay, I know she has to have conflict with her mother. Something has to happen. But I don't know what that's going to be. So as I was writing, I would jump around. Like, okay, this is what the slam looks like. Okay, this is going to be her first kiss with Ahmed. Okay, this is going to be this situation. And then I would fill the gaps in between with different poems. But it took me about 4 years. I know, right? I know that seems like a long time. And I'm a fast writer. But I couldn't figure out what the story was. And I had to be patient and kind of let this character show up when she was ready to show up. And that took time.
I definitely get the fast writer thing.
Yeah.
Because when I'm at school and I'm just writing, and I give it to my teacher, and he's like, Kailyah, you finished too fast,
Yeah.
and so there's your grade. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm a slow reviser, right? That's part of the process. I write quick, and then I'm like, what is this? Gotta go back in and like, okay, let's actually figure this out. So I can get my thoughts down, but it takes me a while to edit. Most of the time I spend on a book is editing. This one was actually, I know we haven't asked about with the Fire on High, but just to give you an idea, was for National Novel Writing Month. The first draft of With the Fire on High was written in 30 days. The revision of With the Fire on High, on the other hand, that joint was a mess. So it took a couple of years to really tighten it up.
So with the Poedex, did you like start out like, okay, maybe this is just a poem, and then it's like, okay, whoa, maybe I could do something with it?
No, when I sat down with the Poedex, I really had this vision of it being a novel. That was what I was setting out to do. I was an 8th grade English teacher in Prince George's County, Maryland. I taught at a school that was 78% Latinx, around 20% Black American. They had never had a Latina teacher. They had never had an Afro-Latina, period, teaching in the school. And I felt this real like onus to find literature that represented my students. And there was just so few books that like spoke to the experience that they wanted to read about. And so that's when the idea of the Poedex started kind of percolating. And I'd never read a book that had slam in it. And I think slam is one of those like cultural things that's just like, when you're in it, you're obsessed. And then the rest of the world thinks they know slam. They don't really know slam, right? And I wanted to get that. I wanted to hone in on this young woman who has so much shame around her body. But slam and performance is one of the places where she can own who she is and can kind of push all of that away. So I knew that was going to take a novel. That wasn't going to be 1 or 2 poems. The problem was that I wrote 40 poems and I was like, I'm done. That's the story, because I didn't know how to write fiction yet. Yeah. And so when you're a writer, or a poet, you use very few words and you get your point across and you're done. And so it took me a while to be like, okay, I have to stretch the storyline.
So it took you a while from going from like, you know, poems feel quick and to the point to a novel where it has like you have the whole story to tell and a lengthy amount of time.
Right. I think a poem is about brevity. It is about getting a point across with the least amount of words. A novel, you're allowed to delve more into character and multiple plot lines and move in different directions and text messages and essays. So I wanted to show a journey that was going to take a little bit more than a few pages. And her growth, right? I wanted to dedicate the time to what it means to be a young woman who is struggling with who you are and that you got to be patient with that process. And so the book was my also being patient with showing the steps of how she got ultimately where she got, even though it's just a little bit of growth, right? But it took me all of these pages to get that across.
It goes a long way.
It goes a long way.
Okay, so why did you censor religion the way you did in this book? How did you, so what I want to say is, how did you get, here's Xavier, and he's just pretty chill with the religious things, but here's Mom, and she's just so hard on it and just
It's a great way to put it. It's right. Yeah. So I'm gonna give you some behind the scene craft stuff that happened that I don't often mention. In the 4-year process. So I had my 40 pages. I was stuck. I was like, okay, she made it to the slam. I'm done. What else do we talk about? And I went to a poetry workshop with a friend of mine who lives here in DC. And he had all the poets in the workshop pick a phobia out of a hat. And we were just doing a little prompt. My phobia was hagiophobia, which is a fear of saints and relics. And one of the first pieces that I wrote in that little workshop was about a girl who has to kneel at an altar because she was in trouble with her mom. I didn't know that was going to be this story. For me, that was a separate thing. I'm just doing the prompt in this little thing that my homie's leading. And when I got home, I started kind of thinking, what if I bring this together? I don't like reading stories with religion. I feel like sometimes they're trying to like hit me over the head with a message. So I was nervous. I was like, man, can I downplay it? Can I move it aside? Maybe the mom, but it just felt right. Like it felt like the kind of conflict and the kind of questions that felt authentic. And it also speaks to gender roles, right? That Xavier, he doesn't have to subscribe to some of those ideas because in many ways, although he has his own struggles, the church doesn't talk about men in the way it talks about women. The Catholic Church, right? The Xiomara is the one who is a fighter and really strong and used to taking up and moving through the world in the way that she has to. And here she feels like she's being told, like, you know, don't cross your legs in church, be really quiet, follow the mandates, don't be like Delilah or Eve or all. There was no example of women that she could follow. And so their upbringing, although they're twins in the same house with the same parents, demonstrates how gender plays into how they're treated. And the church was a part of that for them.
Like, it's definitely more so, don't do this, don't do that, not what can I do.
Right. And I think that church can be really empowering for a lot of people. Like I you know, in no way is this book supposed to be hating on churches. So many people in my family have found joy, right, and strength through faith, and specifically through the Catholic Church. I just remember growing up and having a lot of questions that went unanswered. And sometimes we're told we can't ask those questions. And it was important for me to give this character the space to be honest about those questions and to feel okay with, I don't know if this is for me. I think she needed that permission, and I think readers need that permission.
I actually think it's very interesting to see even how the father, like, he's very, like, before he wasn't really in that lifestyle, he was doing it whatever, but now he's more like, oh no, so just, I don't really care, just ask your mom or whatever.
Right.
Much more reserved.
Yeah, much more reserved.
Right. And I wonder, both my books have these fathers who are present absent, right? They're kind of there, but they're not involved like that.
Emotionally involved.
Right.
They're gonna get the credit anyway.
And it's that complicated thing of, you know, the father in Poet X, he's not in the church, but he's also not like, you know, maybe you're being too hard on her, right? He's kind of just like, oh, that's your job. That's a mother's job to guide a daughter. Like, I have no parts in that. And I thought it was an important critique to make of how certain cultures treat parenthood. And how daughters fall in one realm and everyone else, you know, sons are for dads. And like, what does that do to a young woman who wants both her parents involved?
Well, speaking of other characters, so we were wondering, well, like, in any character, like, let's talk about, if you could put in the perspective of another character, which would it be?
So if I were to write a section of the book, or even sometimes people ask me for a spin-off, if there's going to be a sequel, like what character. A lot of folks want to hear from Twin. That's who they're into, and they want to know his story. I love fan fiction. I would love to see other folks write his story. I think Twin deserves that. I would really love to write from Isabella Pendemonte Riley's perspective. She's the young woman in the poetry club who's a rapper. I just think that she's so sure of herself, and she's oppositional to Xiomara in that she's petite, and she's loud, and she takes up space, and is competitive, right? And is a certain kind of young woman that I just think is really dope, and encourages Xiomara to be brave through how she moves through the world. And for me, I would love to write like a bunch of dope lyrics. I would love to write it almost as a continuous rap song, or as like a musical on the page told through hip hop. I just think she has a lot to say. And so that's where I would probably lean towards for another perspective.
She's interesting. She was like very comfortable in herself.
Right. And she only appears in a couple of pages, but she's the one who invites Xiomara to the art room. She's the one that's kind of like speak up, right? Like say it again. And for a young woman to be that sure and to kind of lead by example, I think we need more characters like that.
Definitely.
So that's who I would go with. Who would you go with?
Oh my gosh, what's that?
Who do you want to hear from?
I was just over here like, I really want to see Cody's point of view.
Really? Okay.
And I know he's like a really size, he's not even big or anything.
He's not white boy.
We kind of never see him on the page,
Definitely.
but I'm interested in this answer.
Because like Cody's over here, like protecting Xavier when X isn't, and like, and I know X is just like Xavier, why and stuff, but I really want to see Cody and how he feels for Xavier and how it started, especially, and just how I know his parents are really chill about it and everything, but I want to see like behind closed doors and like, does he have a sibling? Is it kind of like the same thing going on with Xavier? Like, what's up, Cody?
I didn't know Cody had so many questions around him. I'm learning so much. Who do you guys line up? Who do you want to hear from?
Okay. It's Twin. I'm sorry. It's Twin. I don't know. I just felt like it would be very interesting because I think when it was in the story where you said like how Twin is just like sitting in the religious chair, but he's like, you can tell he's uncomfortable.
Right.
And it's so interesting because like they don't focus. You're right. They don't focus on the boys, but it's like there's this one who the church is really in opposition with internally, and he can't really speak out. And it's better for him not to speak out because he's gonna fly right through. He's not gonna be focused on. So I would really want to know his story of his like how he realizes and it's like, oh.
So we want a Twin Cody recap love story. Maybe Cody moves back. We're gonna figure this out. Okay, all right. Wheels are turning.
I'd be so happy.
I love it.
Yeah, but like speaking of Twin, like how did you use like the contrast of him seeming perfect, but also being gay or bi, whatever, but being in the LGBT community, which is something that is it's hard for a lot of, especially Afro-Latinx, in the community, being gay and being in the community, especially very religious communities. Right. How did you use that conflict with X, who's really not, it's more like they're focused on her externally, but Xavier has this internal.
Right. For me, his, Twin's queerness came about very naturally. It wasn't necessarily a planned move in advance. I just kind of started thinking about the dynamic of the siblings, the dynamic in the household. What are the secrets that they're both keeping? What are the secrets they're keeping from each other? And from that, developed this character that I knew, okay, he's queer. And it made a lot of sense because to some extent, Xiomara's really upset at the way that she's treated, at the way that people are prejudiced towards her because of her body, because of how quiet she is, but to show that she also holds prejudice, right? That there are things that she's not fully comfortable with, that she's adopted from her parents and from what she's learned, that she is now enforcing onto her sibling, right? And if she wants her brother to be a safe place for her, she has to be that for him. That in all this time she's trying to defend him, and what he really needed was just somebody to hold him and be like, yo, you're good, right? And so she's always looking outwards as opposed to being like, what are we doing at home? And Twin, for me, kind of had that quiet strength of stop worrying about what's happening out there. Stop worrying about what they say. Stop worrying about always fighting people. Like look inward. Who are you? And he's very clear with who he is. He's quiet and he's not saying those secrets. But for me, that contrast of what does strength look like, and what are the ways that we make we have this toxic masculinity that even applies in situations like this. She wants him to fight. She wants him to be bigger. She wants him to use his fist. And it's like, what about soft boys and sweet boys and boys who are like, nah, I'm good. I just want to like read. I just want to mind my business and read my comic book and like keep it moving. Like that deserves room to be explored. That deserves room to be a character in this kind of story as well. And so I wanted to show some of that contrast that they had and how they both had to grow and like learn from each other how to be a little bit different in order to protect themselves, but also to show how they love each other.
Yeah, that's very interesting because you didn't really see the mom or the dad pushing Twin to be the masculine figure of the house, but you saw X doing it, and that's very. I thought it was more like, oh, maybe she's just tired of defending him all the time.
I think that's part of it. You know, with boys, I think it's not necessarily that they're pushed to be more manly, is that they're pushed not to be feminine. Or feminine, what we think of as feminine. So it's like Xiomara's going to get in trouble if she doesn't clean. But they're not going to tell the brother to clean. They're also not going to tell him, like, but they're going to leave him alone. But there's one scene where she's like, you know, if mommy sees you crying, like, you're going to get in trouble with papi. Right? So there are little subtle things of how a boy is supposed to act that he has to keep in mind that's not natural to how he moves. That comes through Xiomara. Like in her protecting him, she's like, if they see you do this, or if they notice this, or if they know you're texting and they hear about this boy. So we never hear the parents come for Xavier, but Xiomara's hyper aware of what might happen. And maybe some of that is just her projecting, but some of it is also learned in trying to protect him, like, but this is what I've seen in the past.
It's like, to stay out of trouble, you gotta be this way.
Right.
Okay, I see.
I think.
Yeah.
Once a book is done, it's yours. And so this was what I was thinking when I wrote it, but whatever you receive, that's, you know, that's the book, that's the reading part.
Yeah. I wanted to say something. But just like, I think more so the reason why the parents weren't really onto Xavier was because in their eyes he was the perfect everything, like in the book. Like he was studying hard, got into a really good school, he can do it if he wants, and da-da-da-da-da-da. While C was just everything they did not want for a girl to be. Just like you said, she was masculine, she talked with her fist, and just she talked too much when you have to talk too little, in that type of way, you know?
Right. And maybe this is a good argument for like more of his perspective. Yeah. Because we're seeing it from her, we don't see as much of the conflict that he probably does have with his parents. Where's your girlfriend? Why don't we ever see you at parties dancing with girls? Why are you too sheltered? Which I think can happen in Latinx culture. It's like boys are told like you should be more into the world. You should like, you know, the way that girls are told, no, stay here in the house. And so I'm sure that that's something that would probably come up if it were from his story.
Or maybe, I'm trying to think, like, what if Xavier and Xiomara had, like, switched places?
Right.
How would that be? Like, if Xiomara was more sheltered one and everything, like her dad, then everybody would be A-okay.
Right.
While Xavier was out partying, talking with his fists and everything, everybody would be like, oh, he's just being a boy.
But there is also like that they want to keep their son off the street.
Right, there is that. I wish I had like notes. I feel like we're brainstorming right now, like coming up with an outline, which I don't do by myself, but maybe in a group session. There's a good merit for maybe this story from Twin.
Okay, so we were talking about Cardi B.
Yeah.
Not on camera.
I love her.
So we wanted to say, why did you choose Cardi B instead of, you know, Amarala Negra from Miami?
For which for where she's getting her hair braided?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know too much about Amara La Negra because of when the book was finalized. It was probably the end of 2015, and so Amara La Negra was very. She wasn't on TV yet. We hadn't seen her on Love and Hip Hop yet. I don't listen necessarily to a lot of like reggaeton or Spanish pop, which I think is the space that she occupies. I'm much more into like hip hop, R&B, and very much New York at that, right? Unless you're, so for me, I think it's partly my own ignorance of how large the field was, as opposed to like the merit of Amara La Negra. And if this were written today, I think some of the folks that ended up in the Poetex might not be there, right? Which is one of the funny things about writing about hip hop. There are very few books that have what I would call almost like an annotated bibliography of hip hop. It's all these artists. And in some ways, from the day the book was published till now, a lot of those artists have made some questionable decisions, which I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want that. Like, I don't know if Xiomara would actually be messing with you right now, listening to your music. But I think that a book is an amazing thing because it shows the times. It shows the moment that it was written. And so I can't take some of those things back, and maybe I shouldn't want to, but it's like how much has changed in just the few years that the book was done. So I probably would have included, Amara La Negra. I probably would have included a lot more about Cardi B, right? I think we were talking about women rappers, maybe a lot more no name, right? Maybe Megan Thee Stallion. Like I wanted to pay homage to women, which is why there's one mention of like Eve, right? and like Ja Rule and Little Mo. Like I wanted to pay homage to the women in hip hop, but it was just at the time, some folks were under the radar still.
I thought it was actually interesting because like Cardi B is Afro Latina as well. She's Dominican.
She's Dominican.
So it's like, oh, maybe this was like a way to say like this is my representation right here on the screen.
It was the closest I could get. Her album wasn't out yet, and so I couldn't do much more except for what I had seen from her on Instagram. But it still felt like, that was me putting a bet on who I thought she would be. To be like, okay, this is who Xiomara is still looking towards.
How do you like the album actually? I was supposed to ask that question.
I love Invasion of Privacy. I think it's a really smart album. I think for me, some people will have really great hits, but it felt cohesive as a project, right? There's a lot of songs about love. There's a lot of songs about moving into the world. I think the first track is one of my favorite in terms of like, get knocked down 9 times but you get a 10. Like it feels like a kind of anthem. And she's smart. Like she's a smart cookie, and so I'm rooting for her. We can talk about Cardi later. We can just have a whole session on Cardi.
When I first started reading the book, I did look back at some of your previous performances, and there was one you did with Pages. I forgot what it was titled, but it was a group piece, and you were talking about how your names, specifically like your first names, helped you or was easier for Americans to swallow, easier for you to assimilate. But we have X here who complains about how people don't really get her name. Like they don't really understand it. They always mess it up. But you talked about a different experience that your parents gave you this name Elizabeth, and that's gonna be clear cut. Every American's gonna get it. Yeah. So I wonder how, like, what made you decide to put something different from your own experience, where it was like she has a more ethnic sounding name than you did growing up.
Is it alright if I read it from the book? So I think it helps to get a sense of like what that section is about. And I do that poem that I did with G. Yamazawa and Pages Matan about names called Unforgettable. And for me, the names were really important. Long before I knew the character, the plot, I had already given her this name. And I knew that this was the name I wanted this character to have. So I'll just read really quick that section. I'm the only one in the family without a biblical name. Xiomara isn't even Dominican. I know because I Googled it. It means one who is ready for war. And truth be told, that description is about right, because I even tried to come into the world in a fighting stance. Feet first, had to be cut out of mommy after she'd given birth to my twin brother Xavier just fine. And my name labors out of some people's mouths in that same awkward and painful way until I have to slowly say, Xiomara. I've learned not to flinch the first day of school as teachers get stuck stupid trying to figure it out. Mommy says she thought it was a saint's name. Gave me this gift of battle and now curses how well I live up to it. My parents probably wanted a girl who would sit in the pews wearing pretty florals and a soft smile. They got combat boots and a mouth that's silent until it's sharp as an island machete. For me, you know, even with the poem that I did with G and Pages, it was almost like a lament. It was us really looking at the way that our parents, in an attempt to make things easier for us, stripped us of a little bit of our culture, right? That when you see the name Elizabeth, my parents didn't even want to give me a middle name because they said that wasn't an American thing. They thought that was very much cultural, even though it is, but their perception of America was you didn't use middle names. And so I feel like there was so much in an attempt to make it easier that was taken from me. And so when I was writing this character, I wanted her to have a name, and all of the characters, right? Ahmed, Kailyah, mother's name Altagracia, Xavier. Like, I wanted to give them names that were powerful. I wanted to give them names that made sense within the context. So a lot of them are very religious names because of one of the main themes. But even in this book, right? Like, Imani also talks about her name. Her name is Imani Santiago, and how she feels anxiety about how Imani is hard to pronounce, and how the way that it's spelled, it's not spelled Imani like the way it is during Kwanzaa. She has a different spelling that she feels like says a lot about who she is. So she names her daughter Emma. She's like, that's a simpler, right? That's more of an Elizabeth name. That's like the easy to digest name. And so that I'm continuously thinking about the ways that there is this pressure in order to make it easier, you know, honestly, for white Americans to say certain names that comes into the delivery room and comes onto the birth certificate. That's like, that has nothing to do with what a name carries and what a name does. And so I wanted to give my characters powerful names, and I wanted them to also realize they have powerful names. And Xiomara just is upset that people don't know how to say it. She's not upset that it's her name, right? Like, she's like, no, my name is dope. I just wish they could say it. And so that felt really important for me. And Warsan Shur, who has a poem called, is all about names, like, give your daughters difficult names, because that's how they can test who will or won't, you know, show them the kind of respect that they need. And that just seems really important. Like, you know, people should take the time out to learn how to say your name.
So if you could rename yourself, what would it be?
Xiomara, actually. This was like my alter ego name for the longest. Really? So this makes sense in a lot of ways that it's the name I would give her. But I've always loved names that just feel, I love the name Yahaira. I love the name, anything having to do with like celebrations. My confirmation name, because I did do confirmation, is Joan. And it was after Joan of Arc. I've always been obsessed with warriors. And so for me, I look towards who are women, like what is a lineage that my name could carry. But maybe not Xiomara anymore, because clearly I gave that one away, but probably like Yahaira. Yeah. It's dope, right?
What's the meaning of that?
I gotta look it up. That one I think has something to do with light. It's about like sunlight, but I don't know the exact phrase. Elizabeth means oath of God, which when I was growing up I thought was really cool. Like, I'm a promise of the Lord.
He chose me.
Right. I was like, oh, this is Hebrew. Oh, this is this. Oh, every queen was named Elizabeth in England, and that complicated a little bit what I felt to it. Kailyah's like, okay, names.
I mean, I definitely get that name thing, because when I was born, you know Aaliyah, right? Mm-hmm. I was actually named after Aaliyah.
Oh, wow.
But my whole family is more so into the scene of our initials being KJG.
Oh.
So I'm Kailyah Greene, while my sister's name is Kailyah Greene.
Oh, wow.
And we're all just KJGs. And that's cool and all. And the whole family
That's amazing.
is KJG. I don't like that.
It's a different kind of legacy. Yeah.
Definitely. I wouldn't give it to my child though.
I love the name Kailyah.
Mm-hmm.
I like the name Zainab too. Y'all have great names.
Zainab, what does your name mean?
Oh, it's an Arabic name, that's what I know. Well, since I'm from Nigeria, so that's like usually the Arabic or something that they give us. But you talk about religion in this book. So how did you come to the conclusion to say, yeah, I will put religion in this book? Like, how did you feel, like, especially when you said you wanted it to be more a representation for your students. So how did you feel like it wouldn't complicate things, or like, oh, I see that I get this at home already, now I have to read this in a book? Like, how did you walk that line?
Yeah, I just try to be mindful of like that's one of the conflicts, but it's not the only conflict.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of conflicts, and so it was just being, for me, really cognizant of like, when does that come up, but then when are there also other scenes that take place that allow light, that allow levity, that allow laughter, right? So that it doesn't feel like it's all about one thing. But that part of representation, and when we say like representation matters and representation in books matters, is that folks who are going through some of these things, seeing themselves in a book and being like, oh, it's okay to have these questions. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be 12 and be like, I'm not sure if I can make this kind of oath yet. That, you know, I hope the book gives permission to grapple with religion in a way that is more nuanced than just, I do have faith or I don't have faith. That I sometimes have faith, maybe I have faith, I believe in this, but maybe not this, and that it's okay to have those kinds of conversations internally as you figure it out. And so I wanted to, you know, once I realized that that had to be a part of the story, that the book wasn't going to have the same weight. You know, I think a writer clearly has a part of everything we craft, but I think sometimes a character shows up and it's really your subconscious kind of pulling threads together. And my subconscious was saying like, this is the thread you have to follow, even if you don't necessarily want to write about this. Like, that's the story that needs to be told, and that's the story we haven't seen. And so I just kind of followed that instinct.
Like agency within religion.
Agency within religion. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, so when Xiomara's mother decided to burn her journal.
Oh no! Wait, can we say that? What if people don't know that?
Oh, snap. Can we say that?
What if they're watching the interview and they're like, I didn't know? I'm kidding. Skip this part if you haven't finished it.
Yeah.
Put the timestamp.
Put the timestamp.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Big on the screen. I didn't say that.
You ain't heard nothing.
When that happened,
Right.
Yeah.
One of the
Scene.
climactic moment happened.
Yeah.
what were your emotions? Like,
Yeah.
were you mad? Were you angry? Were you feeling kind of helpless? Like Eliza from Hamilton.
I love it. No, I can't sing, but yes, I love that song. I'm gonna give you an unsatisfying answer. Y'all ready? People often ask me about this scene because I think it brings up a lot of feelings in readers. I was overjoyed when I got to this scene because I didn't know what was gonna happen next. And so I knew the mother and Xiomara had to have a confrontation. I didn't know what that confrontation was. I hadn't figured it out. I need to finish the book. And so I'm kind of getting there and I'm like, okay, but what's the beef? Like, what is the one thing that would create, you know, she already got caught kissing. So what's the thing? And then it hit me and it's like, oh, of course, this whole time we were leading towards the one thing she holds sacred against the one thing the mother holds sacred. It had to happen. So it felt genius. And I don't mean that about myself, right? But like literally if the idea, right, if the idea of genius is that like you come to this arrival that feels outside of yourself, that moment 2/3 into the book to be like everything that I created without knowing was leading towards this moment, it felt almost outside of myself. Like it felt channeled. Like the solution and the problem was already written and I just didn't know yet. So I'm hyped. I'm like, yes, I figured it out. I felt so good. I'm like, now they're gonna have a rap battle. Now they're gonna do this. And so I had all of this excitement. Even as I knew, like, dang, readers are gonna be so sad. But yay, I'm so glad that I don't have to sit facing a blank screen for the next few days. And so, upon revisions, of course, I returned to a different state where you're rethinking it, and I had to kind of punch it up, and there were moments where I felt like the heaviness of this moment and what felt like this, you know, wild even for the mommy, like, approach to what was happening. But upon the initial writing, I think it was just this, it taught me a lot of trust of the process, right? I didn't outline this, but look at how we figured it out. And that trusting of the writing, I think, has led me to believe that my stories have the answers in them, and that I just gotta kind of figure out, if I follow the character, I will figure out the story. And that feels really freeing for me as a writer.
So you were like going through this journey with that.
I was going through, I was figuring it out. X was figuring it out in very different ways, but things would happen in the book, or I realized, oh, this has to happen, or this character has to come up, and I would, follow that thread, but it wasn't, I didn't know, I didn't know what was gonna come next. So the surprise delighted me.
Really?
Yeah, it did. I know, I'm sorry about that. Oh.
He's like, I know you weren't expecting this.
I
That's what you
know.
said.
Sorry.
Definitely, though, it was really, to a lot of people I know, it was really like heartbreaking, and people are gonna fight. But I just really wanted to know what was really going in Mama's head. Like, she was done with everything that Xiomara did. She was just over it. She got the camera, she got the lighter, she got the fireplace, she got the book. Which one am I choosing to
You're
burn?
determined to spoil this. You're like, I'm gonna let y'all know.
I keep forgetting. I'm so sorry.
You're good. I think that's exactly what was going through her head. You know what I mean? Like all of those. Yeah, she was fed up. Right? I tried. A lot of people think like the mom character is evil, and I don't think she is. Right? That there's a lot of fear. She's protective. She has a lot of fear about like what it means to have a daughter who is so different than she is and so different than she was, and her protection comes off very aggressively. She doesn't know how to rein it back and realize this isn't serving me or my family. But in that moment, I think she just felt extreme disrespect, which, especially when it's an immigrant family that already feels like a lot of American culture is disrespectful.
Yeah.
To have a right? To have a daughter that's like bringing in these ideas, that's been writing about you, that's been exposing secrets, that's been writing about feelings she has that you think are shameful. I think when you take into account what this meant to her, to be stunned by this thing,
it's like ungratefulness.
This ungratefulness, this just like how I need to get rid of the evidence. Like I need to rid us of this. And it's one of the things that comes up a lot when I get fan mail. People who tell me that they had confrontations with their mother because of things that they wrote, or times that they said too much and they got their family in trouble. This idea of like silence as protection that I think some families try to hold. But especially immigrant families, especially black families, you know what I'm saying? Like marginalized families feel like if we tell the outside world, then they'll do things. They'll take you away. They'll or something will remove you from me when all I've been trying to do is love and protect you. There's this really amazing memoir called Heavy by Kailyah, and he talks a lot about silence and like the abuse that he had to go through with his family and how he couldn't speak about it. And it wasn't in the light, and how his whole memoir is a love letter to his mom, but chronicling a lot of what she did to him. And I think it kind of demonstrates that like we can love our parents and our parents can love us, but that there are ways that we're told not to say anything, and how that almost does as much
damage.
Exactly, as just let's talk about it.
Because like a lot of girls of color, they don't. I know I saw this. Because me and my mom were talking about it, that they don't go to the doctor as much as they should, and they don't because it's like white people stuff.
Right.
That it's not black people stuff, that we're strong and we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that because we can do it fine just by ourselves.
Right.
We don't need to bring other people into our mess.
And especially in some religious households where it's like we can pray it out or we can pray it away, and so there's a lot of stressors around, well, what does it mean to get outside help? I read this recent study that the depression rates amongst Latinas has skyrocketed in the last few years, and it's partly, I think, due to the fact that you're in this in-betweenness of at home there are certain expectations of you that don't match at all the expectations that you have outside. There are cultural norms you have to learn in this space that aren't the cultural norms over here, and you can't talk to either side about what's happening. So it's all of this contained, and I think that leads to all these thoughts of you can't hold it all by yourself.
Yeah.
And so that a lot of the book was considering, like, what does it mean to speak up, and what does it mean to speak at all, and how do you get even a mother who has struggled with having these conversations to realize, you know, silence won't serve me. Like, silence is doing more harm, and like the shame that I feel by people knowing is not, it's not worth what it might cost me to lose my kid.
It is. It's interesting. It's nuance.
Right. I hope so.
Oh, definitely glad that. Wait, never mind, because I'm about to spoil it again. You're just gonna. You have a new book coming out.
Yeah. Yay.
Called With the Fire on High.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely knew this before you've seen the book, because I was looking you up just like Zainab was, and I was kind of stalking you. And so I looked at it and I was like, oh, she has a new book. What the fuck?
She's famous for him. She got a Wikipedia.
Oh, goodness.
Oh my gosh, she's got everything. So, how is it? How would you give us a synopsis of it?
Yes. With the Fire on High is the story of Imani Santiago, who is an aspiring chef, a Philadelphia native, and a teen mom. She got pregnant when she was in her first year of high school. And so this is a story that is looking at what happens after. I think a lot of young adult literature around pregnancy is about whether or not the character will decide to keep a child.
Yeah.
And for me, it was thinking through what happens once that decision's been made, right? Like, how do we look at a character that is often considered, you know, the stereotypical public service announcement, this is what you don't do,
Yeah.
and make that the protagonist and say she can have hope and joy and triumph, even as an Afro-Latina, as a black girl in an urban area, and like that is as deserving as anyone else of being the hero of a story. And so it does have magical realism. Her food has magic. Whenever she cooks, like, people get these feelings and these memories. It's like Ratatouille, but in the hood and with like this dope character, right? You get all these memories and this kind of thing that comes over you. And it was just exploring that. Halfway through the book, you know, she's trying to go to another country. I wanted to explore what it means for young people of color to travel and to go to other places. And so, you know, I think Imani is a really dope and brave character. And if they were to be real people, I think they would have hung out, which is my goal, to build a pantheon of dope black young girls who like kick it.
That's very interesting, because she's like technically what X's mom is trying to keep her away from.
Right.
But it's also to show that like she can have her own fairy tale too.
For
She
sure.
can be her own powerful person.
Yeah.
Without everything that Mama wants.
Yeah.
Right.
She's not just a wrong example, she's her own story.
Right. And that, you know, we have a lot of stigmas around teen mothers and what they can or can't do, and what this country does or does not support. Like, I think there's a lot of ways that we could be approaching this that really allows young mothers to have networks that help them get through this if that's what they choose, right? And so wanted to look at, like, I've worked with young women who were pregnant or who had children and were brilliant and were talented and had all these aspirations, and depending on the community they had around them, they were able to achieve those aspirations or not. That a lot of it was because of what they were able to do with their own parents, within the church, within the community centers, within nonprofits that stepped in and said, okay, how do we help you achieve your dream? They still had to do the work. They still had to show up, but that it's possible. And I just really wanted to show a character who she's doubting herself. Everyone around her is like, you can figure this out, and we got you. But she has this doubt that she's learned. And so it's a little bit different than X, who's being told from the outside world, no, you can't. And with Imani, it's the flip. It's what she's received and told herself.
She's
But
internalized that.
Exactly. And so it's her process of learning how to undo what she thinks the world expects from her, to be like, nah, I got this, and I got this for my daughter as well.
Actually, that's actually very interesting. Like, how did you decide? Because, you know, anything that deals with teen pregnancy, I was like, if you do this, you're encouraging teen pregnancy. Like, how I remember when I was, like, in elementary school, and these older girls were talking about, oh, well, this high school has a daycare for teen moms, that's encouraging teen pregnancy, and stuff like that. So it's always interesting, like, how did you decide to, like, okay, yeah, this is going to be what I'm going to do, and I don't care what any critic's going to say about it?
I think it was like that conversation we're having about silence. You know, if we think that not talking about something is the way to avoid it, like that's never the thing,
Like,
right?
I wanted to say, like, so here's a problem, right? And if you leave it there, if you don't do anything, because I know so many people like this that just leave the problem, it's not, you're just going to keep it there to fester. It's just going to stay there, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow. Talking about the issue and looking at it straight in the face and going head on with it, I feel like you're still doing something, and you're still helping it, and things like that.
And I wouldn't even use the word like problem or issues. I think I would probably look at it more. I was a big reader growing up, and I had a lot of questions, and I couldn't always ask those questions at home. Questions about menstruation, about sex, about what am I allowed to do or not allowed to do? What am I allowed to say if someone asks something of me? And what am I, like, how can I say this is what I'm comfortable with? And because no one had those conversations with me, I would hear from my homegirls, I would hear from dudes on the block, I would hear from gossip, right? I would read a Cosmopolitan and be like, oh, okay, that's how you do it, right? And so for me, I feel like books are such a safe place to be like, here are the possibilities. And here's what happens. And you do with this what you will, but it at least adds a counterpoint to a lot of these, the stories that people hear. And books have to grapple with real life. Books have to do that. Like, I'm not going to be out here sugarcoating what I know happens. Like, teens and young adults engage in relationships with one another, and there's a lot of consequences to that. And how do we talk about that? How do we talk about that honesty, right? And so I guess I worry less about critics and editors and publishers. And when I initially pitched this book, it was like, well, we don't know, because fiction that has to do with teen mothers, like, it's hard to get those characters on the page, and people don't want to read about babies at that age. And then I sent the manuscript, and they're like, oh, okay. All right, we see what you're doing here, right? But my concern is never these folks. Like, my concern is always y'all. What do you all need to read? What do I wish that you have in your hands? What are the counterpoints? And then read something completely different in opposition, so that you can make your own determinations. But I just want to offer up one story and one character that feels real. That hopefully will have someone asking questions and wondering about things, and also answering questions that maybe they haven't been able to prior to reading this book.
That's interesting. Curiosity.
Yeah, I think curiosity.
We have to go now.
But it was really nice chatting with you.
It was great chatting with you. I'm glad we get to leave on a question of curiosity. Hopefully we've whetted the appetite of the people who are watching. It was such a pleasure to speak with both of you. Thank you for being so thoughtful and doing all this work and being amazing readers.
Thank you for being an amazing writer.
I appreciate y'all.
She's talented. She's talented. Get these.
And so are they. So we'll be having your books on our shelf soon.
Ooh. The future is bright. 2020
Speak it into existence.
Yeah.